All right. We're doing another one of these Homeric Rhapsody things. The It's the story of Achilles raiding the town of Eëtion's Thebe, but we are currently in a part where what we just cut to was the gods Hermes and Hephaestus made a bet about who is going to prove the most valorous in a sort of side story thing where Patroclus took the Myrmidons to go fight alongside Idomeneus against an invading, a force that's coming in to support the Trojans. So I literally have no idea what this story is because I have no concept of what I'm going to do here. So we'll just see what the muse says, if anything. Here we go. Sing, O Muse, from on Mount Helicon, who would tell us what occurred down on earth, far, far below Olympus and Ida's peaks, from where Hephaestus and that great Argus slayer, he of the swift feet, watched down with their wager between them. Such it was that among the fighting, Patroclus and Idomeneus too had a wager among them for much the same thing. For Patroclus had found that his Myrmidons he led were quite spry and quite the fighters, as he well knew, and Idomeneus had much pride in his men of Crete, so that among the fighting that had already begun, they spoke, and Patroclus said, I see here that green old age that you have, Idomeneus, it seems to be showing on you. We have already slain several captains of these Thracians, and I do not count among them those that you have slain any of the greater. It seems that you spend most of your time among the smaller forces, those of less consequence, while we sweep up the big dirt and grime off the battlefield. What say you, Idomeneus? I think there might be some deficiency here. It is glad that we came in to support you when we did. Hearing this, that captain of the Cretans grew red in the face, and he said, son of Menetius, I know that you jest, and it is all love behind what you say, but it is still something horrible that has come from behind your teeth. Why do you speak such of myself, Idomeneus, who is the lord of Crete and Knossos and all the great city of the labyrinth? Nay, we have been fighting where the battle is thickest, and though those we've slain may be less in stature, they are quite more than those that you have taken down, for the count of heads and shields and swords strewn about the battlefield where we stand is so much thicker than that where you are. You may be taking down those larger captains and glorying in the armor that they bring you, but we're doing the real work here. And thus they spoke, as they hewed away at Thracians and Cilicians, all coming in at them. For they had been fighting that entire day, from when the woodsman in the forest might make his morning meal, all the way till when Apollo's chariot had strode across the sky and was glinting off the tips of the mountains with its rays of light, turning them red as that dye that a washerwoman might drop into her bucket in order to give some new flavor to an old rag that a man might have been wearing. And such was the fighting thickest among IDOMENEUS, but the greatest deeds of valor had been done so far by PATROCLUS and his myrmidons. And there came up before PATROCLUS one Dares, who was the son of Deucalionides, a man who had been raised in eastern Thrace under the mountains of Calicona, who raised his son and his daughter all in splendor, sparing them nothing and giving them a life of luxury. Such was this Dares, who came arrayed in his beautiful gold-tinted armor, all bedecked with gold along the rims, that cost much more than the entire panoply of other soldiers. He led a company of eastern Thracians who carried that wicker-work pelta shield and the curved long Thracian sword, all of them doughty fighters, and all of them coming from the upper echelons. He came up to PATROCLUS, seeing him from across the battlefield, and marking that this was the man among all the myrmidons who wore armor more splendid than any of them. Whereas the myrmidons, unlike many of the Achaean companies, all wore regulation black armor, black as that carapace of a beetle or an ant. PATROCLUS was something different, who had armor just as Dares did, flecked with gold and white and shining in the sun, as it had been many times polished by him, who always took great care of all his possessions. And so Dares came among him and said, "Who is it that leads the myrmidons? I have heard of Achilles, son of Peleus, but I do not think that this is that man whose hair is said to flow long and golden in the sun like some flash of splendor as the sun leaves the gates of morn. Nay, this is some other, some lesser captain that stands before me, and I will prove to you just how much lesser you are when I show you the might of my right arm." And PATROCLUS said, seeing that he was already prepared to throw, "Nay, you have found a lesser captain, that is true. None can defeat Achilles in a contest of arms, or of stratagems, or swiftness of feet. But you are mistaken if you think that you will best the son of Menetius on this day. I was brought up in Phthia as the nursemaid, the bosom buddy of Achilles, growing up alongside that greatest of fighters, and all his stratagems and all the fighting spirit that is in him has been passed on to me. And so I think you may find it harder than you first expected to take down my soul to Hades." And thus, seeing that Dares was ready to throw, he raised his great shield. PATROCLUS, with that massive round shield, bedecked with gold as well, and displaying on it a beautiful scene of the sea, rolling waves, and the sheaves, and those birds of the air, beautifully carven by the greatest smith who stood in Phthia and stayed in Peleus' court. Thus he raised that shield with its 3 layers of bronze and its 1 of tin. And the spear, though cast with incredible force, more than any man of today's world would be able to do, it did not break through. And Patroclus, seeing that his javelin was spent, he took up his own dart, and he threw it, hurling it with all the might and with all of the spirit that was left in him on this day of quite close and quite intense fighting. And it passed through the man's targe, which had no resistance. Such was it punched through, like a knife that goes through some blade of grass, some thing woven from blades of grass. Such was it, like nothing to that spear, that, thirsting for blood and gore, and wishing to drink from human flesh as its vessel, passed directly into the upper right arm of Dares, punching through and ripping open his arm so that it hung limply down, ghastly, down further towards his shins. Such was that shoulder separated from the bone and sinew, but still connected. And this man gasped out his life as it spilled into the dust before him. And that plain was littered with another corpse that day, which would be feasted on by dogs and kites. Patroclus took from him what pieces of armor he could, though that beautiful corselet was entirely ruined by the great spear cast that he had given it. And he took up his great spear, and he brought it with him, faring further into the fight. To what end, he did not know. All right, I don't know why I added that thing at the end. That was kind of like, almost like implying that something's going to happen to him. That was kind of a cool scene. I thought it was interesting that Idomeneus and Patroclus had like a friendly rivalry. That was kind of cool. There's a part in the Iliad book 23 where Lesser Ajax, in a not very friendly rivalry, is like just entirely insulting Idomeneus. And he's like the oldest of the kind of fighting captains among the Achaeans, not counting Nestor, and I guess Phoenix if he ever fights. They never really mention him fighting, but he's older, and it's made a note of in the story, and I thought it would be interesting for Patroclus to have this kind of like respectful relationship with him, where they're still able to chide each other. We got a nice little battle scene there where they introduced not really their lineage, but at least like a little bit about themselves, and also created a little backstory for this Dares character who we actually got a lot of nice little details about him, and a little overboard with the death scene. Homer typically, he's done way more graphic things than the thing I came up with, which is the idea that the spear cut in through his shoulder so that his entire arm flopped down, still connected to his body, but was hanging like down near his calf. The problem wasn't that it's too violent, because the Iliad is more violent than that, but it was that it wasn't condensed enough, so it was like it was spending too much time on one death scene, which it typically doesn't do that much. So I'll keep working on it, but I thought that overall that was pretty decent. I forgot to mention last episode too. I thought about this afterwards. I threw in something last episode that I forgot to mention in the like post-game roundup thing that I do it all the time, where I added a detail afterwards where like Eëtion was it. I was saying that he stole the sword from Phoenix because, you know, that they were like friends, that over the year that Phoenix was captive in his house, that they had like grown to be friends, and played knucklebones together and stuff. And then that was the way we cut up to heaven, because they were playing knucklebones up there too. But it was kind of an interesting detail, I thought, where it's like, originally the story was that there's not really a reason why Phoenix isn't complaining, and it still doesn't entirely make sense, but it's an interesting wrinkle to claim that, you know, maybe Phoenix is not entirely like opposed to being there just because he's like grown to appreciate the company of Eëtion. I also had an idea, just for full disclosure, that I might incorporate, which is that Eëtion has 7 sons, but we only detailed 6 of them. And so I thought, well, it might be interesting if the final son was actually held in Peleus's court as like a, you know, one of those kind of hostages that kings have from other places so that they don't rise up against them. But that Eëtion, I guess, seized his chance and kidnapped Phoenix somehow to try and just get Peleus to return his son. So I don't know if that's what I'm going to go with, but that would be an interesting thing. And it would also be an interesting like way for the final 7th son to return to the scene. Like, he wasn't with the army when they marched out, but then he would like meet them. So that'd be kind of cool. And I also thought it'd be interesting if the point of that he was raised with Achilles and Patroclus, and then he would be like there's a character in the Cattle Raid of Cooley, which is what we're basing this story on loosely, which I want to say his name is Ferdiad, and he's like the childhood friend of Cú Chulainn, the hero, but they have to fight each other, and one has to be killed. And so it's like a very bittersweet thing. It's like, you know, Solid Snake and Gray Fox or something. And I thought it'd be kind of interesting if this character was the friend of Achilles and that same type of situation had to happen. And that would solve a lot of problems, because that would give an excuse for why they're kidnapping Phoenix in the first place, and also for how this character would have a relationship with Achilles that doesn't feel entirely contrived. And, you know, I'm just disclosing this stuff because that's what popped into my head between times of telling the stories. I don't know if that's actually what I'm going to do, but if I do it, then you'll know that that part I already came up with. Because as I always say on these, I never think about what I'm going to do before it's like time to roll the camera. I think obviously that's not this, you know, sort of like most highly evolved way to write a story, but and it's not even necessarily what they would have done 3,000 years ago when Homer was writing a story, or, you know, was coming up with a story, because he would have been practicing and stuff. But I think it's just interesting to specifically rely on the muse only to come up with plot details and not labor over stuff before it's time to like start coming up with ideas. And we've gotten a lot of cool things out of this that in a second draft would be really cool. Right now it's very clunky and all the pieces are kind of like very like you see them coming a mile away, but once they're all there, then you can start assembling them and making them feel better. So I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out, and we'll see how it goes from here.